Welcome to this Nation of Health talk about mental health and telepsychiatry. My name is Gerda Marie Rist. I'm from Healthcare Denmark, and I'll be your host today. I think we have a very interesting program for the next hour. We'll take a closer look at some of the new solutions that are emerging in telepsychiatry to help people deal with mental health issues. We'll look at this at different perspectives. And that's why we have invited 3 speakers today who are all deeply involved with telepsychiatry in each their way. We have Marie Paldam-Folker, who is Center Director at the Telepsychiatric Center in Region South. And Marie will cover the perspective from the development side and talk about some examples of new digital solutions that are currently being implemented. We have Kim Mathiasen, who is a psychologist and PhD. And Kim will give us a view from the clinical side. So how is it to be a psychologist and use telepsychiatric solutions? And what do the patients say to all this? And we have Michael Gram from Monsenso, who will give us the perspective from the technology provider. How is it to collaborate with the public sector in implementing these new solutions? And after we have had short presentations from each of you, we will have a group discussion with some questions and answers. But why are we even discussing digital solutions in mental health? Why not just stick to the good old methods of face-to-face therapy? We know that works. Unfortunately, we are standing on a burning platform. Mental health is a growing issue. Depression is the largest disease burden in the Western world. And in West Europe, we see that only half of the people who need treatment for common mental illnesses are actually in contact with healthcare professionals to get help. At the same time, we lack professionals to provide the treatment, and the economy in the health systems is stretched. So we need to think out of the box and innovate new solutions that are cheap and that can reach a lot of people no matter where they are. COVID-19 has been very tough on people with mental health issues. But the crisis has also pushed us to try out new solutions. And sometimes the citizens are actually more open to new ways of getting help, while the healthcare professionals may be a little bit more skeptic. But let's discuss later if this is also the case in telepsychiatry. Developing new technical solutions may be a challenge, but the real challenge seems to be the implementation. We meet cultural barriers. Current structures like incentive structures may also counteract a good implementation. And to get a bit deeper into this subject, I would like to give the word to Marie Paldam-Folker, Center Director for Telepsychiatric Center in Region South. And Marie will talk about barriers to the implementation of new digital solutions. Please, Marie.
Well, thank you, Gerda Marie Rist, for giving me the opportunity to present some of our experiences concerning the use of telepsychiatry or digital psychiatry or digital mental health. Many different terms describing what we are doing. Well, the COVID-19 pandemic has changed our understanding of how technologies can be used for mental health care and support. We've seen a scaled adoption of virtual visits worldwide during the pandemic. And as a result, both clinicians and patients have developed proficiency in incorporating different digital tools into psychiatric care. I'm convinced that this scaled adoption of digital platforms for conducting virtual visits may also catalyze a broader adoption of other digital approaches for addressing mental health. The great challenge of a future psychiatry is to find ways to balance the, well, sometimes contradictory goals of providing more individualized, specialized, matched care to patients, while also being able to reach the millions of people worldwide with limited access to mental health care. So lessons learned from the pandemic demonstrate that the thoughtful and responsible use of technology may help us achieve this balance. I hope so personally, and that new familiarity with using digital tools and digital different technologies to access care may speed up the adoption of other digital tools as well. So you've asked me to look into the barriers. Before coming to that, I will give you some examples of technology-based interventions showing a great potential in Denmark right now. So besides the use of video consultations, I would like to emphasize 3 technology-based interventions. 1, internet-based therapy, programs for common mental health disorders. 2, the use of mental health apps. And 3, using virtual reality for mental health. So first of all, internet-based therapy programs for common mental health disorders. Since 2013, Center for Telepsychiatry has been pioneering internet-based therapy. The Danish Internet Psychiatry Clinic, as it's called, is a national digital mental health service funded by the 5 Danish health regions. In the clinic, we provide therapist-guided internet-based self-help to adults suffering from depression and anxiety, mild to moderate. The service is commissioned and developed as an answer to high prevalence rates of depression and anxiety in the Danish population. The service has been operating in routine care since 2015 and has provided online psychological assessment, online therapy and referral services to more than 4,500 Danish adults. During the COVID-19 pandemic, we received permanent cross-regional funding for the service due to strong policy support for online therapy services. So even though we are far from meeting the needs of all Danish citizens, our experience and research at the clinic shows that online therapy is an effective form of treatment. It's offered at low cost and with great flexibility for the patient. So it could very well be a future cornerstone in modern psychiatry. My second example is mental health apps. Well, in my opinion, again, mental health apps are proving to be another potential cornerstone in digital psychiatry. Mental health apps is a catch-all term that is used to describe apps for mobile devices with a variety of purposes and functions. So this can include mood, symptom assessment and monitoring, strategies to aid mood or symptoms like anxiety and depression, and educating users about mental health. There are a lot of different apps that are provided directly to the consumer, and apps that aim to support and enhance the therapeutic process. So with many apps claiming to address mental health and well-being, and more apps coming onto the market every month, the very important question is, how can practitioners and patients identify those apps that may be beneficial? And in an attempt to solve exactly this dilemma or this difficulty, there has been numerous attempts to develop health app libraries, which provide a curated list of approved apps, both in terms of clinical content as well as data security. And I see that, well, health apps libraries, they are very important to the future use of mental health apps. And finally, virtual reality for mental health. Danish research, again, in virtual reality-based treatment is currently showing great potential and promise, especially the treatment of social anxiety via virtual exposure therapy. We also have in Denmark and abroad research in avatar therapy for patients with schizophrenia, and it's showing especially great potential in the treatment of hearing voices. And in Denmark, there are several mental health departments and clinics experimenting with piloting the use of virtual reality in different treatment circumstances. So these are the three potential avenues of using technologies for mental health. Concerning barriers, well, despite these promising technological developments, implementation and adoption in routine mental health care is low. In our experience, the most important barriers to implementation of digital mental health are more organizational, more cultural, more human resource-based rather than technical. In terms of organizational barriers, well, when implementing digital mental health, we often have to rethink our services completely. And this rethinking regards everything from workflows to financial models. So, in my opinion, we have to accept that a digitally enhanced psychiatry, in many regards, is a reorganized or transformed mental health service. So, as an example, automation, telehealth, and self-help treatment formats fundamentally changes how and when the patient needs to see a therapist. In terms of cultural barriers, well, envisioning the care of every patient as the exact right mix of digital services and non-digital in-person services is quite a mental leap for many of my colleagues in our hospital, as well as mental health professionals and managers. So clinicians need to embrace all new ways of working and cooperating with patients if we, for real, wish to reap the benefits of digital mental health. In terms of human barriers, well, evidence shows that the therapist's personal digital competences is one of the most important factors determining the perceived quality of an online treatment service. So in-service training is key here, both in and outside of the therapist's daily routine. And training also applies, the importance of training also applies to patients. So these are some of the barriers we see, and I would like to close by saying that, of course, we also face technological barriers with video conferencing systems not being user-friendly, with low broadband coverage in some parts of the country of Denmark, and with digital solutions being designed for highly literate consumers, leaving behind those who lack proper digital mental health literacy. So we have a lot of work to do.
Thank you very much, Marie, for that very interesting talk. Now I will give the word to Kim Mathiasen, who is Assistant Professor at the Center for Telepsychiatry. And the title of Kim's talk is The Clinician's Access to Digital Psychiatry. Please, Kim.
So, regarding the clinician perspective, also maybe a little bit the patient perspective, I will talk about some of the applications of use of digital interventions seen from these perspectives. I will dive a little broader into the multiple possible technologies that we can and do use, and talk a little bit about implementation also seen from this perspective. And then I'll hopefully synthesize these perspectives a little bit. So first of all, for the applications in the clinic, most naturally, we would go to monitoring of patient systems. That would be the first thought we can get, which is relatively easy using digital technologies compared to what we do or did in the past. So for example, we can have digital questionnaires for patient-reported outcome measurements, but we can also have more sophisticated monitoring systems, for example, on patients' mobile phones, where you can have an app that prompts patients with small sliders where they can evaluate their mood or describe their context at that present moment, so it becomes a more ecological and more momentary assessment of the patients. We can also do passive monitoring with a lot of different technologies that are either wearable or that you can have in mobile devices for monitoring activities or patients' sleep or other things like that. So we can get more input on the change of the symptoms of the patients during treatment. So this is something that the digital technologies bring about that we didn't have the opportunity to use before. And naturally this affects how we as clinicians could work with treatment, because we understand now much more in detail how the development of the condition of the patient is. Usually we would use this both as clinicians as a part of understanding the progression, but it could also be used in tandem with the patients, so that we, with the patients, look at the progression and make treatment decisions based on this. And the next logical step from that would be to implement advanced algorithms that could then predict, say, treatment adherence or dropout or treatment outcomes early on in the treatment, so we can make adjustments. So these can be quite complicated and be based on, for example, machine learning or artificial intelligence or network analysis or other stuff like that. But that would then not be presented in this full complexity to the clinicians. So for the clinicians, this would be, for example, a traffic light indication, so you can have a green, yellow, and red categories regarding risk of dropout, for example, of treatment. So you can have some very complex elements in the back end and then a very simple user interface so that the clinician can use this as decision support. But we also, as Marie already mentioned, have treatments that are completely digital. So we can have complete self-help programs, so patients can go through an entire treatment essentially with no contact to a clinician. That, of course, is a major change in how we provide mental health services compared to what we used to do. We don't do that a lot in Denmark, particularly because it has demonstrated a lower treatment effect on a group level. But it would be something that you would do, for example, for prevention. So instead of for traditional treatment, this could be done as a preventive measure because of its giant reach. But what we've done is more guided by clinicians, the way Marie talked about. But you can also step that up into a blended approach. So you have some sessions that are traditional face-to-face consultations with a therapist or a doctor, and then some of it is based on online modules, for example. And you can integrate this into one treatment protocol. We can also do add-ons, so we have some things that we put onto the treatment that we already do and are used to doing, so that traditional treatments can, for example, be supported by an app that will help with medication adherence, for example, or to do homework assignments for a psychotherapeutic intervention. So there are a lot of different applications. These are just some of them that we are already confronted with, the changes that occur now when we introduce digital technologies, all the way from monitoring to complete digital interventions to a mixture, and the use of advanced mathematical models to do prediction early on in treatment to support a clinician judgment or clinical judgment. So, but all of these applications that I've talked about now, I've deliberately kept it a bit technologically agnostic. So as technology advances, which it does at a very rapid pace, of course, these technologies will change for users in these clinical applications. The ones that we use now are wearables, it's mobile applications, it's sensors, for example, that you can have in the patient's beds so that you can monitor their sleep and use that as an indicator for either directly for treatment of sleep disorders or as a secondary symptom of, say, depression. But we also, I've worked a little bit with an in-ear EEG, which means that you can have a monitoring of brainwave activity or brain activity during sleep. So you'll have a much more detailed analysis of how the sleep patterns change over the course of treatment. So there are many different technologies. One of the newer ones that we're working on is cognitive screening using serious gaming. So this can be a mobile little game that you can play, and then that will create a profile of your cognitive abilities, which is very important for many different disorders or mental health disorders. Naturally, virtual reality, also as mentioned by Marie. So there are a lot of different technologies, and for clinicians and also for patients, a lot of these technologies are new to use, and we can't necessarily expect that everyone has access to these technologies themselves. So there'll be a question of teaching patients how to use them, teaching clinicians how to use them, or make them available. So for example, virtual reality, if you have to come to a studio or a clinic for that, it's different than if you could expect people to have this gear at home. So there are many different aspects of the use of technology that we need to address. And these different technologies can be used pretty much in all the applications, the clinical applications that I mentioned before. So there's a matching between clinical needs, patient needs, clinician needs, and specific technologies that are very important. This also then bears on to the implementation of stuff. So when Marie already mentioned the incentive systems that there are sometimes no economical reimbursement for digital services, which of course means that a department then providing digital services will have a poorer and poorer economy, which of course will be unsustainable. And then there's the issue of training. I've touched on this a little bit, but it's very important that we start addressing training of future clinicians already at the point of educational systems. So that will be in the universities or in the colleges, that already at that time it'll be included in the curriculums. So we've started doing that in Denmark a little bit, and it's progressing rapidly, but it's not there yet fully. So but it's important for the openness to use of digital technologies once you then become a clinician working in a hospital, say, or another mental health setting. And then there's also the training once you then get to the specific environment. The clinician will need trainings in the specific technologies that they will be using at that particular department or for that particular patient group. And this will be a much more in-depth, of course, training for this. And there are some of these technologies where you will also need training of the patients. You need to think of it in that way, or even the people that are around the patient. So we'll need much more flexible models for implementation, but we will also need more flexible models for development. And Mikael will also talk a little bit more about that. That in order to have a healthy and sustainable development and implementation of new tools, we'll need good integration between how the clinicians work, how the incentive structures are, how the industry is incorporated into this, how research is incorporated into this, how educational systems function. So it's a much broader issue than one might think. So to sum up, we'll need, for the clinician's perspective, and I think this applies to the patient perspective as well, we'll need to address what are the real problems that we're trying to solve. Think of that first, not which technologies do we have available. And so that's the clinical applications. Then we'll need to look at what's on the shelves, what do we need to build or develop of specific technologies, and then we'll need a flexible solution with a lot of horizontal and vertical integration in order to have a successful implementation. And I think patients and clinicians need to be included in all of these processes.
Thank you very much, Kim, for that interesting perspective from the clinical side. And now it's my pleasure to give the word to Michael Gram, who will hear about the experience from a technology provider. And Michael Gram is Partnership Director at Monsenso. And the title of his talk is, How does technology create new treatment options and how should it be implemented? Please.
We'll start by looking at healthcare from an industry perspective, what's actually going on as we see it. We see at least several big trends in healthcare, and these trends are driven by an explosion in chronic disease that is driving cost up and crowding out resources. But we also see an explosion in technology available. This means that we are moving from reactive incident-based healthcare into a more proactive healthcare. We are moving from passive to engaged patients because we know engaged patients improve outcomes, and we are moving from reactive to proactive because prevention is best for the patient and also cheapest for society. The next trend that we identify is the potential of data sources. We have data all over the place. We have data from smartphones, apps, smartwatches, blood pressure monitors, sleep mats, optic monitors, all over the place. Your life is full of them, and your home is also full of them, and there are more to come, and they can be used in many ways. We have been part of a research project showing that the activity data from a smartphone can actually be used to diagnose and monitor young people with bipolar disorder. So, just an example. Which brings me to the next point, that all this data will enable us to personalize treatment and also prevent disease from either breaking out or at least keeping it at bay. Artificial intelligence will provide clinicians with even better decision support based on data from the individual patient. It's important to notice that you cannot analyze on an individual level without specific patient data input, especially in psychiatry, where the choice of treatment for similar disorder can vary across individuals. Lastly, even if we see some sliding back to old habits, most predict that telehealth, etc., are here to stay post-COVID-19. What we will need overall is more research and more proficiency in learning and working with data on a clinical level. Simply, clinicians have to be able to figure out what does data actually mean. But let's look at a treatment solution, the Monsenso digital health solution. The solution connects individuals and clinicians to provide optimal care. And individuals with mental health disorders collect their data, both subjective and objective data, and share it with their clinician while gaining skills and insight into their solution or into their situation. And it provides you as a clinician with a visualization of your patient's data captured from their smartphone and pointing out areas where you need to pay attention, which requires medical attention or changes into your current treatment plan. But what makes this solution stand out from other solutions is not only the high frequency of data, but also that it contains treatment support content. And it enables the clinicians to treat in between sessions or even allowing for a full digital treatment. And this sets it apart from other data collecting solutions. What this means is that you can offer a wide range of possible actions, from non-intervention screening over to digital self-treatment to actual blended care with the clinicians involved. So you have the ability to be predictive, preventive, personalized and participatory in one single solution. A quick look at how it is to collaborate with the public sector from our perspective. We have been involved in partnership with many public institutions across Denmark and Europe across the last few years. We have worked with big and small, and with researchers and with clinicians. We have also worked with many different mental disorders. And our experience leads me to point out to two major points, as they have been mentioned partly before, at least incentives have. One of the biggest issues, if not the biggest issue, when doing projects with public sector is the movement from a project to actual widespread adoption of your solution. There is often no reward whatsoever for public managers to adopt successful projects into their business. Sometimes it is even associated with budget cuts or staff reductions, or at least costly implementations. So why bother? So rewarding incentives are needed. Innovations and adoptions must be prized and celebrated and not seen as having a possibly negative impact on your organization. Also, we need to systematically include stakeholders from end users into the projects to eliminate any incoherence or misunderstandings, as well to have an implementation commitment ready to be launched if the project is successful. Secondly, public sector is much bigger than the most private companies. And there will inevitably be considerations about building your own solutions. And this is of course understandable to a degree. For example, integrations between core systems, that would make perfect sense. And we often see such solutions, but we also run into sometimes homemade solutions that are homemade, to say. But there is a reason that companies specializes and develops to a larger customer base. Just like you would prefer your surgeon to be really good and specialized in doing his surgery, you will prefer that the software companies are specialized. And in these times, know-how is very much more specific. Technological know-how is very specific, and it moves at a much higher pace than it did just a few years ago. Knowledge gets outdated so fast and needs to be maintained. And there's also the consideration about the increasing amount of public regulatory demands like the medical device regulation, which requires a very high level of protocols and documentation so to ensure patient safety. This does not come for free. A company that builds, delivers and supports a solution over and over again will have economics of scale and specialization, just like the surgeons at the hospital. So buying knowledge and in the end software or technology is much more cost efficient for the healthcare business than having to build for yourself. And if you're worried about the knowledge transfer, for instance about the ways of working or specific needs, then most companies will gladly share the spoils of profit with you if the product are successful. So use standard software, build to your specific needs and partner up for the rest. Now the final question is, can telepsychiatry actually be implemented in the standard of care in the real world? And the short answer is of course yes, it can. And it has been. We have been involved in the implementation of our specific solution in many areas of mental illness, both projects and actual clinicians using it. And we have of course learned some lessons. Firstly, you have to have commitment and continuous attention from management. And you have to have clear targets on rates of adoption, and management must be visible and they must communicate the targets to the end users. Why are we doing this? What's the benefits to you and the patients? And here incentives are crucial, as I mentioned before. Incentives for the managers, incentives for the users, and perhaps also for the patients. What do they get out of all of this? It will take time and effort to research the different stakeholders, but it will be worth it. And secondly, planning is important to success. Map out the timeline, the gates, the activities, the work packages, the resources, the stakeholders, the operating environment, the support, the communications, and so on and so on and so on. It will take time and effort, but as most of you will probably know, the devil is often in the details. And thirdly, it will take time. Clinicians are not there for the technology, they are there to provide healthcare, and they are not necessarily first movers when it comes to new technology. So you need to give it time, and you need champions that can showcase the good examples and the benefits, and you need to let it grow with time, support, and attention. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Michael, for sharing your experience. And now we'll spend the last time discussing some of the elements that you have touched upon today. And my first question to all of you is, what do you see as the biggest advantages in telepsychiatry? And are there any low-hanging fruits that we can harvest right away?
Well, I can start. The biggest advantages, well, they are that we can provide flexible, you said it, Michael, preventative, proactive, personalized, the 3 Ps, mental health. Yes, and do you agree?
Yeah, well, yeah, I think I love the part about the lowest hanging fruits, because I think there are many of those, and I definitely do. And I think maybe the use of data is probably at the present time in Denmark the lowest hanging fruit, because we have it's a little unique maybe to Denmark, but we have large national registries that we can use for research. And by that we can train some algorithms to be predictive on very large data sets, and that's very important, I think. And we can also do that coupled up to some clinical everyday data as well, particularly now that we can collect digital data. So that's very obvious. And then we've done a lot of internet-based treatment, which has a very wide reach. So that helps on the agenda of equality in healthcare. So there are definitely some very low-hanging fruits that we could start and actually already do use now. Yeah.
Interesting. So if you look into the future, what does psychiatry look like? How digitalized will we be?
This is a very difficult question you're posing. Well, you're asking, the 3 of us, we work with digital psychiatry, so of course we see digital psychiatry to be a very important part of future psychiatry. I think the question is, how do we blend it? How do we combine in-person, face-to-face visits with digitally enabled approaches? Finding the right formula is the challenge, so to speak, because, well, it's not an either or, it's a both. That's what's very important. Yeah.
And is that also what you observe from the tech provider side?
Yeah, definitely. But I also see that we are. It'll be a sort of a pyramid where the heaviest issues are on top, and we can actually use data also to provide healthcare to a much larger base. Also people who do not have a mental issue or illness, but actually just have a hard time, and prevent that hard time from becoming a mental illness. And I think that's probably, it's not the low fruit, but it's the biggest potential, because if we can stop the growth of mental illness, the expansion of mental illness, that will be a huge success for all. And I think that digital solutions play a big part in doing that, because it will be available easily to all, and don't have to go to the hospital or the municipality or something. You can just use your phone or your computer.
I definitely also see the future of psychiatry, or e-mental health, as I would prefer to call it, as a situation where it's less organizational structures that dictate how this treatment goes, and it's more person-centered. So the data belongs to the individual, the treatment belongs to the individual, and it's a much more flexible offering around that person. And that's very hard to do in large-scale organizational structures, but digitally it's much easier. So digital interventions and monitorings and feedback loops and stuff like that will help that process to to bloom, I think. So we can get further with that using digital technologies.
And the individuals will also be much more involved in the development of the new solutions?
Absolutely, we're already doing a lot of that in Denmark and also many other places in the world. There's a very, I think, that's prioritized very highly in many places, because the whole idea of the expert system is kind of crumbling a bit, because it turns out that the patients know a lot about their own condition and a lot about how they will get better. So it's the combination of the individual expert and then us as systems and experts, combining that is really the key.
And we have a lot to learn in that direction.
Absolutely,
we have to improve our ways of collaborating with patients and relatives early on, from devising, from ideation, from finding out which need to address with what technology, through to delivering the digitally enhanced service. And these patient partnerships are vital to a future psychiatry in Denmark and abroad.
Yeah,
but there's no question that will also change the role of the doctor,
exactly.
of the psychiatrist or psychologist, and that might take some time, some practice. But it's I definitely see it as the future of medicine, being not the godly expert, but the enabler, more say.
Yeah, and new studies come out now where they're called N=1. So that means that the amount of participants in one study is one person. So that's the idea of gathering a lot of data on a single participant rather than do mean calculations over a large group of people. And that really also, I think, sets the future for clinical practice.
And of course, it's important to emphasize and to state very clearly that patients are different. There are patients who prefer a digital solution, and there are patients who prefer a physical in-person consultation. And of course, we need to have, as mental health care providers, we need to have a palette or flexible range of solutions, digital and in-person. It's the combination that's powerful.
Yeah, we just finished the study a couple of years ago, where now it turns out that those who preferred the digital interventions, they generally did better. They had a better outcome. So that's very important knowledge. And I think that comes back to, again, the individualized treatment. That we need to have the right tools for the right people at the right time. That's the dogma now we are trying to accomplish.
But as I think I mentioned it in my statement, you cannot personalize without having personal data. I mean, you cannot use your AI on individuals if you don't know what their characteristics are. And for that, you need to harvest data from the individuals. So that's the way things are moving. If we want to personalize medicine, that is, you have to have personal data from individuals. And also, the data has to be high frequency. You cannot just monitor once a month or 5 minutes before a session. That's not good enough. And we also have to learn what all this data then means, because that will give us new insights. Probably your work, Kim, more than mine. But
well, no, I absolutely. That's exactly what we see in research as well. That normally when you see progressions of treatment outcome, you have this nice straight line, and the symptom pressure is going down linearly. Which might be correct on a mean level, but once you then see the individual change scores, say day by day or week by week, it's totally a mess. So it's totally different. So these pictures look completely different. So and that knowledge combined with the knowledge that if we try to predict dropout or treatment outcome from only baseline data, we're not very good at it. We can hardly do it, even if we do it from very large data sets. I've been looking into stuff like this with 1,000 patients in a data set. That's a large data set in mental health. But if we take into account also process variables, like you're talking about, how does things change for this individual? Then double your precision. It's much more accurate. So our predictions need to be based on process variables. And that requires a whole different data collection and usage.
Now, Michael, you touched upon this. We have a lot of data. What is done regarding data security? I know that's a very big question, but maybe you can just say a few words.
Well, if you look at our company, for instance, you have to have data processing agreements, and you have to be accountable for where your data are stored and processed and all that stuff. There are ways of doing that, but if we look at all the different data sources that we have, and there are way more to come, there are issues regarding standards and how, I could take data from, I could call my oven at home, for instance, and it could provide me with data of how often I use it, and it could probably also at some point tell me what I'm actually making kind of food. But is that who belongs the data to? Is it safe to use, and all that kind of stuff? I mean, we are under strict regulations, for instance, medical device regulations that we have to follow. What if all our data sources are just CE marked or not even CE marked? I mean, that gives you some issues to contemplate. And how do they store data? Do they sell the data anyway, or whatever? And there are definitely some issues to be handled, and I think it's an issue of pressing concern.
And I can just add that, well, data security is a joint responsibility, of course, as provider, as health tech provider. You have designated responsibilities, but we do also as mental health care providers, and we have a responsibility also for educating patients about data security, because that's also important, how you use data, how you protect your mobile phone with the application running, collecting all these passive and active data sets. So coming back to the training issues I think it's very important, and it's also relevant in terms of data security.
So when you compare telepsychiatry in Denmark to other countries, do we have a different approach than other countries, and how far are we when we compare us to frontrunners in this field?
Well, it's a difficult question again. Of course, we work with we work with similar technology-based solutions as they do abroad. I think we have something to learn about scaling. We are a small country, 5 million citizens, and again, cultural barriers. We have some habits of developing solutions, using solutions in our own neighborhood, so to speak, our own region. We've succeeded at Center for Telepsychiatry with scaling our internet-based clinic, but it has taken us
5-7 years.
5-7 years, to scale up a solution for national patient uptake. So it takes time. Let it grow, you said, Michael. But sometimes I'm a bit impatient, actually. And I think other healthcare systems abroad have been quicker at scaling up their solutions. But of course, we have different healthcare systems and different incentive structures and blah, blah, blah.
If I might add, I think that Denmark, we have a high degree of digitization. We are very proficient at IT, more than, if you look at Germany, for instance, during the COVID pandemic, we have seen that, for instance, large countries are not necessarily very digitized. We are used to, if you look at how many public apps you have on your phone, you have a driver's license and healthcare cards and all that stuff. So we're used to using apps and that kind of stuff. So I would say that the preparedness is high, but if you look at the healthcare business, the hospitals and doctors, and they are very fragmented. And I think we need national initiatives to further enhance the growth of telepsychiatry, because we have, for instance, 5 healthcare regions all doing their own thing. I mean, and then you have some general practitioners out there also doing their thing, and you have municipalities doing a third thing, and it would perhaps be nice to talk about it at some point. But I think we need a national strategy and a national rollout.
And the countries that we look towards, well, for instance, Canada and Australia, UK, they've had national strategies for e-mental health for years. They have government programs with who funds, who invest in technology development, clinical practice development. So yeah.
It's not too bad though. I think we're doing okay.
But there are different traditions for supporting, for developing this area, digital mental health.
Yeah, so I think we have some advantages in that. So in Denmark, healthcare is almost exclusively, particularly mental health, almost exclusively funded by government money. So it's almost all public health. And that means that we have the structures in place to have common strategies, and we did succeed with this clinic with a national coverage, which many other countries have failed to. So I think we have some advantages there, but we also have the disadvantage that we're all publicly funded. So it's the same thing that creates some of the barriers. So for example, I imagine, this is more your business, but it's sometimes very hard for Danish companies to grow in this environment because your market landscape is up against very dominating and very heavy and very bureaucratic structures. So that's very hard. And then there's the actual behavioral change that in real life will end up, every single clinician has to do something differently. So their habits needs to change. So and we're all really bad at changing habits, all of us, and so that's a real barrier. But that's not country. I mean that goes everywhere. So, but I think I've seen some countries struggle with a more privately funded healthcare system because of that, and we struggle with the public healthcare, but we have some advantages and they had some. So it's, but I think we're getting there. We're catching up, and I think we have a good dynamic and a great momentum at the moment. So let's build on that.
And talking about accepting change and taking new things in a positive way, how did the patients receive this, and what about the practitioners?
Well, that's two different. So usually the patients, they are very happy with us, but I think we also have done a lot to make sure that it's voluntarily. So the patients who can see this perspective and like it and want to do something from home, they're usually very happy with us. And generally, from what I've seen, and also we've done a study, you were participating in that as well, where we went to 5 Northern European countries and compared. We had the patients usually liked these interventions and were not the major barriers. The major barriers came from the clinicians and the incentive systems and organizational structures.
We have done some studies on patient satisfaction, and it's actually quite high. Yeah. And it doesn't indicate that older patients are necessarily less positive than younger patients. And if you, especially if you give them feedback during the user period, then you can actually keep them on the app for several months. I mean, I think we have a 80% stick rate over 3 months. If you give them some sort of, especially if you give them a response or feedback on the data they're reporting.
So time is flying with such an interesting subject. One last question. if you should give an advice to a country that would like to implement digital solutions for mental health, or mental health as you call it, what would that be?
I think we are moving, as I indicated, from reactive to proactive healthcare in many areas, also in diabetes and heart care, heart medicine, and all that stuff. So I think and if you want to do that, you have to look at incentives. You have to look at the way you structure your work in the healthcare business at the hospitals. So that's probably where I would start. That's analyzing the incentives, mapping out the stakeholders, because it's sometimes the small stuff that takes down the whole project.
Yeah, I think I would say keep it person-centered. So if you start from afresh, which some countries have the opportunity to do now, I would say don't try to sort of push your foot into a shoe that doesn't fit. Have this person-centered and initially external, have it on its own premises. So digital interventions, many of them operate best on their own premises and not as pushed into an established routine care. So I think that would be the best way to start.
Exactly. So pay attention to need and be prepared to throw it up in the air, and then proceed through partnerships with private companies, partnerships with patient organizations, individual patients and relatives, developing and implementing these solutions.
Thank you so much for your very interesting input here today. It's definitely an area that has come to stay, I'm sure. We have come quite far in Denmark, but there's still a long way to go, and we'll see where it ends with national strategies and incentives and so on. But thank you so much for being here, and thank you very much for watching this Nation of Health talk. We hope to see you next time.